The lock clicked behind me with a finality that made my chest tighten. I stood on the cracked concrete steps of Riverside Home for Boys, a plastic grocery bag clutched in my right hand, containing everything I owned in this world. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of socks with holes in them, a toothbrush, a photograph of a woman I'd been told was my mother, though I had no memory of her face beyond the faded image. The night air was cold against my face, sharper than I'd expected, and I realized I'd forgotten what October felt like outside those walls. 17 years. That's how long I'd lived behind that door. 17 years of fluorescent lights humming overhead in dormitory rooms, of meals served on plastic trays, of being told when to wake and when to sleep and when to speak. And now I was standing outside of it, free, terrified, and completely alone. The street stretched out before me in both directions, empty and waiting. I had no plan, no destination, no one expecting me anywhere. I only knew I couldn't go back. I turned left for no reason, other than the streetlight in that direction looked warmer somehow. And I started walking. The houses I passed were the kind you see in movies about normal families. Porches with rocking chairs, windows glowing with yellow light, the silhouettes of people moving inside, living lives I couldn't even imagine. A dog barked somewhere, protective and purposeful, and I quickened my pace. I didn't belong in neighborhoods like this. People would see me, this gangly boy with a plastic bag, and they'd know. They'd call someone. The authorities. The orphanage. I'd be dragged back to that room with its 6 beds in a row, to the smell of industrial detergent and desperation. So I kept walking, through the residential streets, past the shopping plaza that was closed for the night, past the gas station, where a tired clerk watched me through the window with suspicious eyes. I walked until the buildings thinned out and the pavement turned rougher. My feet hurt. The sneakers they'd given me at Riverside were too small, had been for months, but there was never money for new ones. There was never money for anything that mattered, just enough to keep us fed and clothed and present, just enough to meet the minimum requirements. I'd learned early that hoping for more than the minimum was a waste of energy. The road started to slope downward, and the trees grew thicker on either side. I could smell earth now, damp and organic, so different from the sterile smell of the orphanage. The moon was bright enough that I could see the outline of mountains in the distance, dark shapes against a slightly less dark sky. I had no idea where I was going. Part of me didn't care. The other part, the part that still had some survival instinct left, was starting to panic. It had to be past midnight. I was cold. My stomach was empty, and I had nowhere to sleep. I thought about finding a park bench, or maybe a bus shelter, but the idea of lying down in the open, where anyone could find me, made my skin crawl. So I just kept walking, down that sloping road, into a valley I hadn't known existed until that moment. The houses had disappeared completely now. There was just the road, the trees, and the sound of my own breathing. I was so lost in my thoughts, in the rhythm of walking, that I almost didn't see it. The farm. It appeared suddenly as I rounded a bend, set back from the road behind a sagging fence. The farmhouse itself was dark, but not in the way the suburban houses had been dark with sleep. This was darker, emptier, abandoned, I thought. The barn was closer to the road, a hulking structure with one door hanging slightly open. I stopped walking and stared at it. Every rational thought told me to keep moving. Don't trespass, don't get caught. But I was so tired, my legs were shaking, and that barn, with its open door, looked like shelter. Just for a few hours, I told myself. Just until dawn. Then I'd figure out what to do next. I squeezed through the gap in the fence, careful not to catch my jacket on the rusty wire, and made my way across the overgrown field toward the barn. The grass was knee-high and wet with dew. My shoes were soaked within seconds. Up close, the barn looked even more neglected than I'd thought. The wood was weathered grey, and parts of the roof had collapsed, but it was dry inside. That's what mattered. I slipped through the open door and into the darkness. The smell hit me first, not the rot I'd expected, but hay, old hay. Yes, but still that sweet, dusty scent. And something else, something I couldn't quite identify. I stood still, letting my eyes adjust, and that's when I heard it. Breathing. Not my own. Someone else was in here. My heart slammed against my ribs. I took a step backward, ready to run. But then a light flickered on. A small camping lantern, battery-powered, illuminating the corner of the barn, and in that circle of light, I saw them. A woman, maybe in her 40s, with tired eyes and hair pulled back in a messy braid. A teenage boy, probably my age, sitting up on a blanket with a defensive expression, and a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, rubbing sleep from her eyes and staring at me with open curiosity. We looked at each other for a long moment. Nobody moved. I wanted to say something, to explain that I didn't mean to intrude, that I'd leave immediately, but my voice had disappeared. The woman spoke first. Her voice was softer than I'd expected. Not angry, not scared, just tired. "You lost?" she asked. I shook my head, then nodded, then shook it again. I didn't know how to answer that question. Was I lost? I'd never known where I belonged in the first place. "You running from something?" the teenage boy asked. His voice was harder, more protective. I looked at him and saw the same wariness I felt. He was guarding something. His family, I realized. This little family living in a barn. "I'm not going to hurt anyone," I managed to say. My voice came out hoarse. "I was just looking for a place to sleep. I didn't know anyone was here. I'll go." I turned toward the door, but the little girl spoke up. "Are you hungry?" Her voice was small but clear. I stopped. I was hungry. I'd been hungry for hours, maybe longer. I looked back at her. She had climbed off the blanket and was standing now, wearing pajamas with faded cartoon characters on them. "Lily," the woman said, a warning in her voice. But Lily ignored her mother and walked closer to me. She was holding something. A granola bar, I realized. One of those cheap ones from the gas station. She held it out to me with both hands, like it was something precious. "You can have this," she said. "You look sad." Something cracked in my chest. This little girl, living in a barn, offering me her food. I didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve any kindness. But I took the granola bar because refusing it would have hurt her more. "Thank you," I whispered. The woman stood up then, brushing hay from her jeans. She looked at me for a long time, and I could see her making calculations, assessing risks, weighing options. Finally, she sighed. "You can stay tonight," she said. "But just tonight. We can't take on anyone else's problems. We've got enough of our own." I nodded quickly. "I understand. Thank you. I'll be gone in the morning." The teenage boy didn't look happy about it, but he didn't argue. He just moved over on his blanket to make space between him and the wall. The woman gestured to an old tarp folded in the corner. "That's cleaner than it looks. You can sleep on it." I retrieved the tarp, spread it out as far from them as possible, and sat down. The barn felt warmer now, less frightening. I unwrapped the granola bar slowly, trying to make it last. But I was so hungry, I devoured it in 4 bites. Lily was still watching me. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jacob." "I'm Lily. That's my mom. Evelyn. And that's Lucas. He's my brother." She said it with such simple confidence, as if we were meeting at a playground instead of in a barn in the middle of the night. "Nice to meet you," I said. Evelyn turned off the lantern then. "Get some sleep, everyone. Morning comes early." The darkness returned, but it felt different now, less oppressive. I lay down on the tarp, using my plastic bag as a pillow, and listened to the sounds of this makeshift household settling in for the night. Lucas's breathing evened out first, then Lily's. Soft and rhythmic. Evelyn took longer. I could hear her shifting, restless. She was probably regretting her decision to let me stay, probably lying awake, worrying I'd steal something or hurt them. But eventually, even her breathing slowed. I stared up at the dark ceiling of the barn, at the gaps where moonlight leaked through, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Safe. Not forever. Just for tonight. But that was enough. I woke to the sound of roosters, which was disorienting because there hadn't been roosters at Riverside. The morning light was filtering through the barn walls, dusty and golden. and for a moment I forgot where I was. Then it all came back. The escape, the walk, the family in the barn. I sat up quickly, my body stiff from sleeping on the hard ground. Evelyn was already awake, folding blankets with practiced efficiency. Lucas was outside somewhere. I could hear him moving around. Lily was sitting cross-legged near the barn door, playing with what looked like a set of wooden blocks. She saw me looking and waved. "Good morning, Jacob." "Morning," I said. I stood up, folding the tarp the way I'd been taught at Riverside. Everything in its place, leave no trace. I picked up my plastic bag. "I'll get going now. Thank you for letting me stay." Evelyn looked up from her folding. In the morning light, I could see her more clearly. She had lines around her eyes and mouth, the kind that come from stress more than age. But there was kindness there too, buried under the exhaustion. "You got somewhere to go?" she asked. It was a simple question, but it hit me hard. No. I had nowhere to go. No plan, no money, no future beyond the next few hours. But I couldn't burden these people with that truth. They had their own struggles. "I'll figure something out," I said, trying to sound confident. Evelyn studied me for a moment, then turned back to her blankets. "There's a water pump around the side of the barn, if you want to wash up before you go." It was such a small kindness, but it meant everything. I nodded and slipped outside. The morning air was crisp and clean, nothing like the recycled air of the orphanage. The valley was beautiful in daylight, rolling fields bordered by trees that were turning autumn colors. The farmhouse I'd seen last night looked even sadder in the sunshine, its paint peeling, its porch sagging, but there was something honest about it, something real. I found the water pump where Evelyn said it would be. It took some effort to get it working. The handle was stiff with rust, but eventually cold water came gushing out. I washed my face and hands, the cold shocking my system awake. When I looked up, Lucas was standing a few feet away, watching me. "You really leaving?" he asked. There was something in his voice I couldn't quite read. Not hostility exactly, but not friendliness either. Suspicion, maybe, or curiosity. "Yeah," I said. "Your mum said just one night." He nodded slowly. "Where you headed?" "Don't know yet." Lucas crossed his arms. He was built stronger than me, I noticed. Shoulders that came from actual work, not just mandatory exercise periods. "You run away from home?" "Something like that. They're gonna come looking for you." I thought about the staff at Riverside. Would they even notice I was gone? I'd turned 17 last month, which meant I was aging out anyway. In a few more months, they would have kicked me out with the same plastic bag and the same lack of preparation. Maybe they'd be relieved I'd saved them the trouble. "I don't think so," I said honestly. Lucas seemed to consider this. "The fence on the north side is falling down. Needs repairs before winter, or the whole thing will collapse. Mum can't afford to hire anyone." I looked at him, confused about where this was going. "Okay, I'm just saying, if someone helped fix it, that would be worth something. Maybe a few days' worth of meals and a place to sleep, just until it's done." My heart started beating faster. "Are you offering me work?" "I'm saying there's work that needs doing, and you look like you need a place to stay. Mum won't say it, but I can tell. She's worried about you. Lily already likes you, which is rare. She doesn't trust easily." I didn't know what to say. This felt too good to be true. "I don't know anything about fixing fences. I'll teach you. It's not complicated." He shrugged. "Look, I'm not being nice. I need help. The farm is falling apart, and I can't do it all myself. But if you try anything, if you steal from us or hurt Lily or my mom, I'll make sure you regret it. Understand?" I understood, and I respected him for being direct about it. "I understand. I won't cause problems. I promise." Lucas studied me for another moment, then nodded. "Come on then. Let's see if you can handle a hammer." We spent that morning assessing the damage to the north fence. It was worse than Lucas had described. The posts were rotting. The wire was torn in multiple places, and several sections had collapsed completely. "This is going to take weeks, not days," I said. Lucas laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Yeah, welcome to my life." We went to the barn to gather what tools we had. As we worked, Lucas started talking, not about personal things at first, just about the farm. It had belonged to his father, he explained. His dad had been a good farmer, kept everything running smoothly. But he died 2 years ago. Heart attack, in the middle of ploughing the south field. Mum tried to keep it going, Lucas said, his voice tight. But she doesn't know farming, and we didn't have money for help. We lost most of the livestock, had to sell the tractor, eventually couldn't even afford the mortgage anymore. That's why you're in the barn? I asked quietly. He nodded. Bank took the house 6 months ago. They haven't done anything with it yet, just boarded it up. We stayed in the barn because we had nowhere else to go. Mum keeps saying it's temporary, that she's going to find something better. But, he trailed off. I didn't need him to finish. I understood temporary situations that became permanent. What about school? I asked. Lucas gave me a look. What about it? You go to school? I aged out, I said. I was at Riverside Home. I know what it is. We passed it sometimes when we still had a car. He paused. That why you ran? Couldn't stand it anymore. Something like that. We worked in silence for a while, pulling out the rotted posts, clearing debris. The work was hard, physical, in a way that felt good. At Riverside, we'd had chores, but they were meaningless tasks designed to keep us busy. This was different. This mattered. Around noon, Evelyn appeared with Lily trailing behind her. She was carrying a battered cooler. Break time, she announced. Can't work on empty stomachs. We sat in the shade of a large oak tree, and Evelyn distributed sandwiches from the cooler, peanut butter and jelly, on white bread, the same thing I'd eaten thousands of times at Riverside. But somehow it tasted different here. Better. Lily sat next to me, swinging her legs and humming some made-up tune. Are you staying now? She asked, between bites. For a little while, I said, glancing at Evelyn to make sure that was okay. She met my eyes and nodded slightly. Lucas told me you're helping with the fence. That's good of you. It's not charity, I said quickly. He said I could stay, in exchange for work. It's fair. Still good of you, Evelyn said, softly. Not many people would offer help to strangers these days. I wanted to tell her that they were the ones who'd helped me first, that without their kindness, I'd probably be sleeping under a bridge somewhere. But I didn't know how to say it without my voice breaking, so I just nodded and took another bite of sandwich. After lunch, Lucas and I went back to work. Evelyn and Lily disappeared somewhere, though I could occasionally hear Lily's laughter floating across the field. The sound was strange to me, pure joy. Kids at Riverside didn't laugh like that. We were always too aware of being watched, of being judged. That first day of work turned into 3 days, then a week. The fence was a bigger project than we'd anticipated, but I didn't mind. The work gave my days structure and purpose, and slowly, cautiously, I started to feel like less of an intruder. Evelyn set up a better sleeping area for me in the barn, with an old mattress she'd been keeping in storage. Lucas started explaining things without me having to ask, teaching me not just about fence repair but about farming in general. And Lily appointed herself my shadow, following me around and chattering about everything and nothing. One evening, after we'd finished working for the day, I found myself sitting outside the barn with Lucas. We were both exhausted, covered in dirt and sweat. The sun was setting over the valley, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Your mum seems stressed, I said carefully. Lucas nodded. She's always stressed. Money's tight, really tight. She works night shifts at a warehouse in town, but it's barely enough to cover food. And without a car, she has to walk 3 miles each way. That's terrible. Yeah. He was quiet for a moment, then said, She won't ask for help. Too proud. Dad was the same way. They both grew up poor and worked hard to get this farm. Losing it nearly killed her. Metaphorically, I mean, though I worry sometimes about the other kind of killing too. I understood what he meant. I'd seen that kind of exhaustion at Riverside. The kind that came from fighting too hard for too long, with no relief in sight. What about you? I asked. What do you want? Lucas laughed without humor. What do I want? I want my dad back. I want the farm running again. I want Mum to sleep more than 4 hours a night. I want Lily to have a normal childhood, instead of growing up in a barn. He paused. But what I'll probably get is a job at the warehouse when I turn 18, same as Mom. And this place will rot until the bank sells it to some developer who'll bulldoze everything and put up houses. That's bleak. That's realistic. We sat in silence, watching the last of the daylight fade. I thought about my own future, which felt just as uncertain. I couldn't stay here forever. Eventually, I'd need to find real work, a real place to live. But the thought of leaving this place, these people, made something in my chest hurt. I'd only been here a week, but it already felt more like home than Riverside ever had. The next morning, I woke to the sound of raised voices. It was unusual. Evelyn and Lucas rarely argued. I sat up on my mattress, listening. "We can't afford it," Evelyn was saying. Her voice was strained. "If we don't pay the storage fees, they'll auction off everything. That's Dad's stuff in there. All his tools, his equipment, everything. We couldn't fit in the barn." "I know that. Lucas, don't you think I know that?" There was a pause. Then Evelyn's voice again, quieter now, but somehow worse. "I'm doing everything I can. I'm working every shift they'll give me. I'm not eating lunch so you kids can have more. What else do you want from me?" I heard Lucas's voice, thick with emotion. "I want you to let me drop out and get a job. I want you to stop pretending we can hold on to this place. But I didn't hear what he wanted, because Lily started crying, and the conversation shifted immediately. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, feeling helpless. These people had given me shelter when I had nothing, and I had no way to help them. The fence was nearly finished now. Maybe another 2 days of work. Then what? Would they ask me to leave? Should I offer to stay and help with other things? But I had no money to contribute, no skills beyond basic labor. I was just another mouth to feed. I spent that day working harder than ever, pushing myself until my muscles screamed, as if I could somehow fix their problems through sheer physical effort. Lucas noticed. "You're going to hurt yourself working like that," he said around mid-afternoon. "I'm fine. You're not fine. You've been attacking that fence like it personally wronged you." He sat down on the ground, forcing me to take a break. "What's going on?" I couldn't look at him. "I heard you and your mum this morning. I'm sorry. I know I'm making things worse by being here." "What?" "No, Jacob. That's not." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "That argument had nothing to do with you. We've been having that same fight for months. Mum's too stubborn to give up, and I'm too practical to keep pretending everything's going to be okay. But I'm eating your food, using your resources. You're working for it. More than working for it. Actually, you know how long it would have taken me to fix this fence alone. Months. You've cut that time in half." He looked at me seriously. "Don't think we're doing you some huge favor. You're pulling your weight." His words should have made me feel better, but they didn't, because I knew the truth. When the fence was done, I'd have no reason to stay, and they'd have no reason to keep me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Evelyn's voice that morning, about the desperation in it, about Lucas's frustration and Lily's tears. I thought about my own situation too, about the fact that I was 17 with no family, no home, no future. I'd been so focused on surviving day by day that I hadn't thought about the bigger picture. But now it was hitting me. What was I doing? Where was I going? I got up quietly and slipped outside. The night air was cold, reminding me that winter was coming. What would happen to them when the temperature dropped? The barn had gaps in the walls. They had blankets, but would it be enough? I walked across the overgrown field toward the farmhouse. In the moonlight, it looked ghostly, its boarded windows like closed eyes. This family had lost their home. They were living in a barn, barely surviving, and they'd still taken me in. They'd shared their food, their shelter, their kindness. Why? I didn't deserve it. I was nobody, nothing, a throwaway kid from an orphanage, but they'd treated me like I mattered, like I was worth something. I sat down on the porch steps of the abandoned farmhouse and put my head in my hands. I needed to do something. I needed to help them somehow. But how? I had nothing to offer. I must have sat there for an hour, maybe longer, just thinking, and slowly, an idea started to form. It was probably stupid, probably impossible, but it was something. The next morning, I asked Evelyn if I could borrow Lucas for a few hours. She looked surprised but nodded. What for? I need him to show me where the nearest town is. I want to see if anyone's hiring. Evelyn's expression softened. Jacob, you don't have to. I want to, I said firmly. I want to help. You've all done so much for me. Let me try to give back. Lucas agreed to take me, and we set off, walking down the road toward town. It was about 5 miles, he said. Doable on foot, though exhausting. You really think you can get a job? Lucas asked as we walked. I have no idea, but I have to try. The town was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. We walked down the main street, looking for help wanted signs. There were a few, but when I went in to ask, the responses were always the same. Too young, no experience, no transportation, no phone number where they could reach me. By the third rejection, I was starting to lose hope. This isn't working, I said to Lucas. He shrugged. I could have told you that. This town doesn't hire outsiders, and you definitely look like an outsider. I looked down at my worn clothes, my 2 small shoes. He was right. I looked exactly like what I was. A runaway with nothing. We were about to give up and head back when Lucas grabbed my arm. Wait, there's one more place we could try, but you're not going to like it. He led me to a diner at the end of the main street. It looked rough. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that had been sitting too long. But there was a help wanted sign in the window. Old Pete owns this place, Lucas explained. He's mean as a snake, works his employees hard, and pays minimum wage. But he doesn't ask questions, and he's always looking for help because nobody wants to work for him. Sounds perfect, I said, only half joking. The inside of the diner was exactly as depressing as I'd expected. An old man with white hair and a permanent scowl was behind the counter. Pete, presumably. I walked up to him, trying to look more confident than I felt. I saw your sign. I'm looking for work. Pete looked me up and down, his expression unreadable. How old are you? 17. You in school? No, sir. Got parents? No, sir. Where you living? I hesitated. Lucas jumped in. He's staying with us, on the old Morrison farm. Pete's eyebrows went up. The Morrison place? Thought that got foreclosed. It did, Lucas said evenly. We're in the barn. For a moment, I thought Pete was going to laugh at us. Or worse, pity us. But instead, he just nodded slowly. Barn's probably better than some places I've slept. You ever worked food service before? He asked me. No, sir, but I'm a fast learner, and I'll work hard, whatever you need. Pete studied me for a long moment. Then he sighed, sounding tired. I need someone for the evening shift, 5 to midnight, Tuesday through Saturday. Washing dishes, bussing tables, taking out trash. $8 an hour. You show up late once, you're fired. You break something, it comes out of your pay. You steal from me, I'll call the sheriff. Understood? $8 an hour, 5 days a week, 7 hours a day. That was $280 a week. Over $1,000 a month. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was more than nothing. Understood, I said. When can I start? Tonight. Be here at 5 sharp. Wear dark pants and a clean shirt if you have one. Pete turned away, dismissing us. Lucas and I walked out of the diner in silence. Once we were outside, he let out a low whistle. I can't believe that worked. Me neither, I admitted. My hands were shaking. I had a job, an actual job, for the first time in my life. I was going to earn money. Lucas clapped me on the shoulder. Come on, we need to get you back and tell Mom, and then we need to find you a clean shirt. The walk back to the farm felt shorter somehow. I was exhausted, but there was an energy buzzing under my skin. Hope, maybe, or purpose. When we got back and told Evelyn, her reaction surprised me. She looked upset. Jacob, you don't have to do this. You don't owe us anything. I know I don't have to. I want to. Evelyn's eyes were shiny. You should be thinking about yourself, about your own future. This is thinking about my future, I said. And it was true, because for the first time, I could imagine a future, not a vague, uncertain tomorrow, but something concrete, something real. That evening, I walked into town alone and started my first shift at Pete's diner. It was brutal. The kitchen was hot and cramped. The dishes were endless. And Pete yelled at me 3 times in the first hour. But I didn't care. I worked until my hands were raw and my back ached. And when Pete handed me $40 in cash at the end of the night, payment for the first week in advance, I stared at those bills like they were magic. I walked back to the farm in the dark, clutching the money in my pocket. When I got there, everyone was asleep except Evelyn. She was sitting outside the barn, wrapped in a blanket, looking at the stars. "How was it?" she asked softly. "Hard, but good." I sat down next to her. "Evelyn, I want to give you this." I pulled out $30 and held it out to her. She looked at the money, then at me. "That's yours. You earned it." "I know, and I want to use it to help. Please. It's not much, but it can buy groceries or pay toward whatever bill is most urgent." For a moment, I thought she was going to refuse, but then she took the money, her hand trembling slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means." We sat together in silence, and I felt something settle in my chest, something that felt almost like peace. The weeks that followed established a rhythm. I worked at the diner 5 nights a week, came home exhausted, slept a few hours, then spent my days helping Lucas with farm projects. The fence was finished, but there was always something else that needed attention. A leak in the barn roof, broken equipment that could be repaired instead of replaced, the well pump that needed maintenance. Lucas taught me everything patiently, and slowly I started to understand how things worked, how to fix things, how to build things, how to take care of a place. Lily continued to follow me around whenever I was home, chattering constantly. She'd tell me about the birds she saw, or the pictures she drew in the dirt, or the stories she made up in her head. At first, I didn't know how to respond to her. I'd never been around small children before, but gradually, I learned to listen, to respond, to care about her small, important world. Evelyn picked up extra shifts at the warehouse whenever she could, and between her wages and my contribution, things started to feel less desperate. We could afford real groceries instead of just cheap staples. Lucas got new work boots. Lily got crayons and paper, small things. But they mattered. One Sunday, my day off, we all worked together to clean up the area around the barn. We pulled weeds, cleared debris, even planted some wildflower seeds that Evelyn had bought on sale. It was backbreaking work, but there was something joyful about it, about working together towards something. That evening, as we sat around a small campfire Lucas had built, roasting hot dogs on sticks, Lily leaned against me. "Jacob," she said. "Yeah? Are you going to stay forever?" The question hung in the air. Lucas and Evelyn both looked at me, waiting. I hadn't thought about forever. I'd been so focused on surviving, day by day, week by week. But now, sitting here with these people, watching the fire flicker in the growing darkness, I realized something. I didn't want to leave. This place, these people, they'd become something I'd never had before. A home, not a building, not a location, but a feeling, a sense of belonging. "I'd like to stay," I said quietly, "if that's okay with everyone." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "Of course it's okay. You're part of this family now, Jacob, whether you know it or not. Part of this family." The words echoed in my head, too big and too precious to fully comprehend. I'd spent 17 years as nobody's son, nobody's brother, nobody's anything, and now this woman was telling me I belonged. Lucas must have seen something in my face because he threw a balled-up napkin at me. "Don't get emotional on us. You're still on dish duty tomorrow." I laughed, grateful for the deflection, and threw the napkin back at him. Lily giggled, and just like that, the heavy moment passed. But the feeling remained. I was part of something now, something real. As autumn turned toward winter, our little family developed traditions. Sunday dinners, where we'd pool our resources and make something special. Evening storytelling sessions, where Lily would make up fantastical tales and we'd all pretend to be captivated. Morning coffee with Evelyn before she went to sleep after her night shift, where we'd talk about small things and big dreams. I learned things about them that made them feel more real, more solid. Evelyn had been a teacher before marrying Lucas's father. She'd given up her career to help run the farm. And sometimes I could see her mourning that lost version of herself. Lucas loved to read, especially old westerns, and dreamed of someday writing his own stories. Lily was afraid of thunderstorms, but loved rain. She'd stand in it for hours if we let her, spinning in circles with her face turned up to the sky. And slowly, I shared things about myself too. Not everything. Some wounds were still too fresh. But I told them about Riverside, about the loneliness, about the feeling of being invisible, of not mattering to anyone. "You matter to us," Lily said, simply when I confessed this one evening. "You matter a lot." Children have a way of saying profound things with complete unself-consciousness. I pulled her into a hug. This little girl, who'd offered me a granola bar in the dark and changed everything. Winter arrived with a vengeance. The temperature dropped. And suddenly, our barn shelter seemed much less adequate. We hung blankets over the gaps in the walls, huddled closer together at night, wore every piece of clothing we owned in layers. It was miserable. One particularly cold night, I couldn't sleep. My breath was visible in the air, and despite 3 blankets, I was shivering. I could hear the others shifting restlessly too, everyone too cold to find rest. In the morning, I made a decision. I asked Pete for extra shifts. He grumbled about it but agreed. For the next 2 weeks, I worked doubles whenever possible, coming home at 2 in the morning, sleeping a few hours, then working around the farm before heading back to the diner. It was exhausting, but I had a goal. When I finally had enough money saved, I walked into town and bought 2 space heaters at the hardware store. They were second-hand, but in good condition. The store owner looked at me curiously when I counted out my cash, but he didn't ask questions. I carried them back to the farm, one under each arm, feeling like I'd won the lottery. That night, when everyone returned to the barn and saw the heaters, Evelyn actually cried. "Jacob, you spent all your money on these. Not all of it, and we need them. We can't get through winter freezing." Lucas helped me set them up properly, running extension cords from the barn's limited electrical supply. It wasn't perfect, but that night, for the first time in weeks, we were warm. Lily fell asleep with a smile on her face. "Thank you," Evelyn said to me quietly, "for everything, for staying, for helping, for caring." "Thank you for letting me stay," I replied, "for giving me a chance, for treating me like I'm worth something." She pulled me into a hug, and I let myself lean into it. She smelled like industrial soap and exhaustion and kindness. She smelled like a mother, I realized. Not my mother. I'd never known mine, but what I imagined a mother should smell like. Safe, like home. Christmas approached, and I dreaded it. At Riverside, Christmas had always been the worst. Well-meaning volunteers would bring donations, and we'd all have to pretend to be grateful for whatever random items we received. Socks, generic toys, books we'd never read, all wrapped in cheerful paper that somehow made the whole thing sadder. I mentioned this to Lucas one day while we were working on reinforcing the barn door. "Christmas sucks when you're poor," he agreed. "Last year, we had nothing. Mum tried to make it special for Lily, but we couldn't even afford a tree. What about this year? This year's different. We have a little money saved. Not much, but enough for something small. And we have you." He said it so casually, like my presence was a gift. "We should do something," I said impulsively. "Something to make it special. For Lily especially." Lucas looked thoughtful. "Like what?" "We spent the next week planning in secret. It couldn't be anything expensive. We didn't have much money to work with, but it could be meaningful." I worked extra hours at the diner, saving every penny I could spare. Lucas did odd jobs for neighbors, fixing things in exchange for small payments. Even Evelyn, when she found out what we were doing, contributed what she could. On Christmas Eve, While Lily was asleep, we decorated the barn. We couldn't afford a real tree, so Lucas and I had cut branches from a pine tree at the edge of the property and constructed a makeshift tree in the corner. Evelyn had made ornaments from scraps of fabric and old buttons. I'd bought a string of lights from the dollar store. It looked nothing like the perfect Christmas trees I'd seen in movies, but it was ours. Under the tree, we placed our modest gifts. I'd bought Lily a set of colored pencils and a drawing pad. For Lucas, a paperback western I'd found at a thrift store. For Evelyn, warm gloves that weren't falling apart. They weren't much, but they'd been chosen with care. Christmas morning, Lily's reaction made everything worth it. She woke up, saw the tree, and gasped. "Santa found us!" she exclaimed, and then immediately looked embarrassed. "I mean, I know Santa's not real, but this is like magic anyway." We opened presents slowly, savoring each one. Lucas got me a good knife, the kind with multiple tools, saying every farmhand needed one. Evelyn had knitted me a scarf, the blue yarn, probably costing more than she could afford, and Lily gave me a drawing she'd made. It showed the four of us standing in front of the barn, holding hands, with a giant sun overhead. "That's our family," she explained, pointing to each figure. "That's Mum, that's Lucas, that's me, and that's you. We're all together." I stared at that drawing, at those four stick figures, and felt my throat close up. "It's perfect," I managed to say. "Thank you, Lily." That afternoon, Evelyn made a special dinner with a small chicken she'd splurged on. We ate together, laughing and talking, and for those few hours, we weren't a family living in a barn. We were just a family. After dinner, as we sat around the space heaters enjoying the warmth and the full feeling in our stomachs, Evelyn looked at each of us. "I know this isn't a traditional Christmas. I know we don't have much, but I want you all to know something." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "This is the best Christmas I've had in years, because we're together, because we're taking care of each other, because we haven't given up." Lucas nodded. Lily hugged her mom, and I felt something in my chest expand, something that felt dangerously close to happiness. That night, lying on my mattress in the warm barn, I thought about my life. 6 months ago, I'd been nobody, a number, in a system, a kid aging out with nowhere to go. I'd run with no plan, no hope, expecting to fail. Instead, I'd found this broken, beautiful family, this place that wasn't much but was everything. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about a boy who ran away from an orphanage and found something he'd never known he was searching for. I know you didn't have to stay, but you did, and that means something to me. If you've enjoyed this journey, I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe. Share this with someone who might need to hear it, because stories like this matter. Stories about finding family in unexpected places, about belonging despite the odds, about home being people, not places. But I'm not done yet. There's more to tell. Winter continued its grip on our valley, but inside our barn, we stayed warm. The space heaters I'd bought hummed constantly, and we learned to arrange our sleeping areas to maximize the heat. Lucas rigged up a system of tarps and blankets that helped insulate the walls better. It wasn't comfortable by any standard definition, but it was survivable. And survival, I was learning, could feel like victory. My job at the diner became routine. I knew Pete's moods, knew which customers tipped well and which ones didn't, knew how to move through the cramped kitchen without getting in anyone's way. Pete never warmed up to me exactly, but he stopped yelling quite as much. Once, he even grunted something that might have been a compliment about my work ethic. From Pete, that was basically a medal of honor. I gave most of my money to Evelyn, keeping only what I needed for the essentials. She protested at first, but I insisted. "You're feeding me, housing me. This is the least I can do." Besides, it felt good to contribute, to be needed, to matter in a tangible way. One evening in January, I came home from the diner to find everyone huddled around Lucas's phone. They looked up as I entered, and I could see immediately that something was wrong. "What happened?" I asked. Evelyn's face was pale. "The bank," They're finally doing something with the farmhouse. They're going to auction it next month. My stomach dropped. Can we buy it back? Lucas laughed bitterly. With what money? Even if we pooled everything we have, we couldn't afford the down payment, let alone the mortgage. But this is your land, your family's land. Was our land, Lucas corrected. Now it's the bank's land, and soon it'll be some stranger's land. We sat in heavy silence. I'd known this was always a possibility, but facing it as reality felt different, harsher. What will happen to us? Lily asked in a small voice. Nothing will happen, Evelyn said firmly, pulling her daughter close. We'll figure something out. We always do. But I could hear the uncertainty in her voice, the fear. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay awake thinking about the injustice of it all. This family had lost so much. Evelyn's husband, their home, their livelihood, and now they were about to lose even the proximity to what had been theirs. I thought about the farmhouse, sitting empty while we shivered in the barn, about corporate policies and foreclosures and systems that ground people down without seeing their humanity. I thought about myself too, and about how close I'd come to having nothing, how I still might have nothing if they decided to leave, to find somewhere else to go. The next morning, I approached Lucas while we were working. Tell me about the farm, when your dad was alive. What was it like? Lucas looked surprised by the question, but he started talking. He told me about the crops they'd grown, the livestock they'd raised, the rhythm of farm life. His eyes lit up as he described it, and I could see the child he'd been, proud of his father's work, eager to learn and help. Could it be like that again? I asked. If we had the money to start over. As and round. In theory, sure. But we don't have money. We barely have enough to eat. But if we did, could you run a farm? Do you know enough? Lucas studied me. What are you thinking? I don't know yet, but there has to be a way. We can't just give up. He shook his head. Jacob, I appreciate the optimism, but some things are impossible. This is one of them. Maybe he was right. Probably he was right, but I couldn't accept it. That night at the diner, during a slow period, I got to talking with one of the regular customers. Her name was Marie, and she came in every Tuesday for coffee and pie. She was probably in her 60s, friendly in a no-nonsense kind of way. You look troubled, she observed as I refilled her coffee. Just thinking about stuff. Heavy stuff, or regular stuff. I hesitated, then found myself telling her the whole story. About the Morrison family, about the farm, about the upcoming auction. Marie listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. The Morrison place, she said finally. I remember when Bill Morrison ran that farm. Good man. Sad what happened to him. Sadder still what happened to his family after. Is there anything that can be done? Any way to help them? Marie looked at me appraisingly. You really care about them, don't you? They're my family. The words came out before I could think about them. But once they were out, I knew they were true. Well, Marie said slowly, I might know some people who could help. There are programs, sometimes, for family farms, grants or low-interest loans, but it's complicated, and there are no guarantees. Could you give me information, contact details, anything? She wrote down some names and numbers on a napkin. Can't promise anything, but it's worth looking into. I tucked that napkin into my pocket like it was precious treasure. When I got home that night, I told Evelyn about the conversation. She was skeptical. Jacob, these programs usually require things we don't have. Credit history, collateral, proof of farming experience. But it's worth trying, isn't it? What do we have to lose? Evelyn looked at me, and I saw something in her face. A flicker of hope she was trying hard to suppress, because hope, when it disappointed, hurt worse than resignation. Okay, she said, finally. We can try. The next few weeks were a blur of research and phone calls. Evelyn made calls during the day, using her precious cell phone minutes to talk to county offices and agricultural extensions. I made calls from the diner's phone when Pete wasn't looking. Lucas searched for information at the library in town. What we discovered was both encouraging and frustrating. There were programs that could help. Farm rehabilitation grants, first-time farmer loans, land preservation initiatives. But the bureaucracy was overwhelming, and the timeline was impossible. The auction was in 3 weeks. "We're not going to make it," Evelyn said one evening. She looked defeated in a way I'd never seen before. "Even if we qualified for everything, which we probably don't, the paperwork alone would take months. So, we need to delay the auction," Lucas said. "How?" "I don't know. But there has to be a way." I stayed up late that night, thinking, and then I remembered something. At Riverside, there had been a caseworker who'd been particularly kind to me. Her name was Miss Chen. She'd always said, if I ever needed help after aging out, I should contact her. I'd never thought I'd take her up on that offer. But maybe she knew something. Maybe she had connections. The next day, I called her from the diner. She remembered me immediately. "Jacob, I wondered what happened to you. Are you okay?" "I'm okay. Actually, I'm better than okay, but I need advice." I explained the situation, talking fast, trying to fit everything into the brief time I had. Miss Chen listened, asked clarifying questions, and then said something unexpected. "There's a lawyer I know. Does pro bono work sometimes? Family law. But she's helped with property issues before. Let me reach out to her. I don't know if we can afford a lawyer. Pro bono means free. Jacob, let me see what I can do." 3 days later, we had a meeting scheduled with the lawyer. Her name was Patricia Ramos, and she met us at a coffee shop in town. She was younger than I expected, probably in her 30s, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. We told her everything, about the farm, the foreclosure, the timeline, our situation. She took notes, asked detailed questions, and didn't seem shocked or judgmental about the fact that we were living in a barn. "Okay," she said when we finished. "This is complicated, but there might be options. First, we can request a delay on the auction. Sometimes banks will grant extensions if there's a good faith effort to resolve the situation. Second, we can apply for emergency relief programs. They exist specifically for cases like this. Third, we might be able to demonstrate hardship and get you into a payment plan." "What are our chances?" Evelyn asked. Patricia was honest. "Not great. Maybe 30%. But 30% is better than 0. We left that meeting with homework. Documents to gather, forms to fill out, evidence to compile. It was daunting, but it was something. For the first time, we had a plan. The next 2 weeks were intense. We worked on applications during every spare moment. Evelyn compiled farming records from before her husband's death. Lucas wrote a proposal for how we'd run the farm, if given the chance. I got letters of reference from Pete and Marie, and even Miss Chen. We documented our situation, our needs, our hopes. Patricia worked tirelessly, submitting paperwork, making calls. And slowly, impossibly, things started to shift. The bank agreed to delay the auction by 30 days, while our applications were reviewed. We qualified for a hardship grant that could cover some back payments. A local agricultural co-op offered to provide seeds and equipment on credit if we could secure the land. It wasn't guaranteed. There were still a dozen ways it could all fall apart. But it was possible. We might actually be able to save the farm. During this time, something else was happening too. People in town had started to hear about our situation, and to my surprise, some of them wanted to help. Marie organized a fundraiser at the diner. It wasn't much, just a bake sale and some donated items for a raffle, but it raised $800. A farmer from the next valley over offered to help Lucas repair the old tractor if we could get the parts. A church group donated food and supplies. Even Pete, Gruff Pete, slipped me an extra $100 one night and told me not to mention it. I was overwhelmed by the kindness. These people didn't know me. They barely knew the Morrisons, but they cared. They wanted to help. It restored something in me that Riverside had damaged. Faith in people. Faith in community. The day finally came when we got the news. Patricia called Evelyn's cell phone, and we all crowded around to hear. We'd been approved. Between the grants, the loans, and the community contributions, we had enough to buy back the farm. We could keep it. We could keep our home. Evelyn cried. Lucas shouted. Lily danced around in circles, and I felt something break open in my chest, something that had been locked tight for 17 years. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. The next few months were a whirlwind. We moved from the barn into the farmhouse, and it felt surreal. Actual walls, actual rooms, actual privacy. The house needed work, a lot of work. But it was structurally sound, and it was ours. Lucas and I spent every spare moment repairing things. We fixed the plumbing, patched the roof, replaced broken windows, painted walls. Each improvement felt like a victory. Evelyn was able to cut back her hours at the warehouse, though she still worked part-time. She started planning what crops we'd plant in the spring. Lucas studied farming techniques obsessively, determined to make this work. I kept my job at the diner, but started thinking about the future differently. Maybe I could take classes, learn more about agriculture or business. Maybe I could be an actual partner in running this farm. One warm evening in April, we all sat on the newly repaired porch, watching the sun set over the valley. The fields were green, with new growth. We'd planted our first crops the week before. There was so much work ahead still, but for the first time, it felt manageable. Lily was leaning against me, as she often did now, chattering about a butterfly she'd seen. Lucas was discussing irrigation systems with his mum, and I was just listening, feeling the warmth of the setting sun on my face, feeling the solidity of the porch beneath me. Jacob? Evelyn's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I looked at her. She was smiling, but her eyes were serious. I want to talk to you about something. My heart started beating faster. Was this it? Was she going to say it was time for me to move on, to find my own place now that things were stable? Okay, I said carefully. Evelyn glanced at Lucas, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked back at me. We want to make it official. We want to adopt you, if you want that. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. What? Adopt you, make you a Morrison. Legally, permanently. Lucas jumped in. You're already family. We just want to make it official, so you know you're not going anywhere, so you know this is your home. Forever. Forever, Lily added. In case there was any doubt. I couldn't speak. The words were too big, too overwhelming. They wanted to adopt me. Me, the throwaway kid from Riverside. They wanted to make me their son, their brother, part of their family officially, permanently. You don't have to decide. Right now, Evelyn said quickly. I know it's a lot, and there's paperwork involved, and it takes time, and yes, my voice came out rough. Yes, I want that, if you're sure. We're sure, they all said together. And then we were all hugging, all crying, all laughing. When I finally pulled back, Evelyn placed a hand on my shoulder, the way she'd done that first week, when I'd thought I was just passing through. But this time, she said something different. You're home now, Jacob. You're home, and you're ours, and that's not going to change. For the first time in my life, I believed it. I was home. Not because of a building, though the farmhouse helped. Not because of a location, though the valley was beautiful, but because of people, because of this family that had taken in a scared, running boy and shown him what love looked like. I thought about that night I'd escaped from Riverside, walking down dark roads with nothing but a plastic bag and fear. I'd thought I was running away from something, but actually, I'd been running toward this, toward them, toward home. The legal adoption process took several months, but Patricia Ramos helped us navigate it. There were background checks and home visits and interviews, but in the end, it was approved. On a crisp day in October, almost exactly a year after I'd first stumbled onto this farm, I legally became Jacob Morrison. Lucas handed me a card that day. Inside, he'd written, "Welcome to the family, officially, though you've been my brother for a while now." Lily gave me a drawing, another one of our family, but this time, it included our names written carefully above each figure. Her spelling of my new name was a little wobbly, but it was perfect, and Evelyn gave me something small and worn. A key. This was Bill's, she said quietly. Your dad's. He always said a man should have his own key to his own home. So here's yours. I held that key in my palm, feeling its weight. My home, my family, my life. The farm thrived that first year. Not without challenges, but we faced them together. When the irrigation system failed, Lucas and I worked through the night to fix it. When a late frost threatened our crops, we all got up at dawn to cover what we could. When money got tight again, we adjusted, cut corners, found solutions. We were a team. Lily started school that fall, and I walked her to the bus stop every morning. She'd hold my hand and chatter the whole way, and I'd listen. This little sister who'd grabbed my hand that first night, like she'd known me forever. She'd been right to do that. We'd known each other in some way that transcended time. On my 18th birthday, Pete offered me the assistant manager position at the diner. It came with a small raise and more responsibility. I accepted, seeing it as a step towards something bigger. I was still figuring out my path, but I had time now. I had stability. I had options. That winter, our second together, was easier than the first. The farmhouse was warm. We had food. We had each other. On Christmas Eve, we decorated the tree together, a real tree this time, and placed presents underneath. They still weren't expensive gifts, but they were thoughtful, chosen with care. When Lily opened her main present, a bicycle we'd found at a garage sale and completely refurbished, she screamed with joy. "Santa knew exactly what I wanted," she said, then looked at us with a knowing smile. "I mean, Santa/family. We all laughed. That's what we were. Family. I thought about where I'd been a year ago, 2 years ago, all the years at Riverside when I'd been alone, unimportant, unwanted. It felt like a different life. Like something that had happened to someone else. In a way, it had. That Jacob didn't exist anymore. I wasn't the scared kid with a plastic bag. I was Jacob Morrison, son, brother, farmhand, dishwasher turned assistant manager. Someone who mattered, someone who belonged. One evening in the spring, I found myself back at the barn. We used it for storage now. No longer a shelter, but just a building with a purpose. I stood where my mattress had been that first night, where I'd lain down exhausted and terrified, certain this was just temporary, just one night of shelter before moving on to nothing. I hadn't known then that this would be everything, that these strangers would become my family, that this place would become my home. Evelyn found me there. "Feeling nostalgic?" she asked. "Something like that. Just thinking about how different things are now. Better or worse." I looked at her. This woman who'd offered me food when she barely had enough for her own children, who'd given me a chance when she had every reason not to, who'd made me her son. "So much better," I said. "I didn't know life could be like this." She hugged me, and I hugged her back, and we stood there in the old barn, surrounded by the echoes of what had been and the promise of what still could be. Thank you for staying with me through this entire story. Thank you for caring about what happened to a boy who ran away with nothing and found everything. If this resonated with you, if it touched something in your heart, please consider subscribing. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this, stories about finding family and home in unexpected places, they matter. They remind us that we're not alone, that there are people out there who will see us, really see us, and choose to love us anyway. My story isn't unique. There are thousands of kids aging out of foster care every year, thousands of families barely holding on, thousands of people who feel invisible and unwanted. But here's what I learned. You only need one person to see you, one person to offer kindness, one moment where someone chooses you, and everything can change. I escaped from the orphanage with nowhere to go. I found the family I never had on an abandoned farm. But more than that, I found myself. I found purpose and belonging and love. I found home. And if you're out there reading this, feeling lost or alone or unwanted, please know, your story isn't over. Your family might be waiting for you in the most unexpected place. Your home might be just around the corner. Your life can change in ways you can't imagine. It did for me. It can for you too. Keep walking. Keep hoping. Keep believing that somewhere out there, someone is waiting to see you, to choose you, to love you, Because they are. I promise they are. This is my story. The story of how I became Jacob Morrison, how I found my place in the world, how I learned that family isn't about blood or biology. It's about choice. It's about showing up. It's about loving someone, even when, especially when, the world says they're not worth loving. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And remember, you matter. You belong somewhere. You just might not have found it yet.